Today, we take a global look at reactions to the U.S. torture report. In the Now, we ask whether allies who took part in rendition programs should be held accountable when no American officials get off scot-free. George Bush was fully aware of the CIA's torture program.
The Feinstein report suggests that President Bush was not fully briefed on the program and was deliberately kept in the dark by the CIA.
Not true. He talks about it extensively in his memoirs. He was, in fact, an integral part of the program. He had to approve it before we went forward with it. I think that he knew everything he needed to know and wanted to know about the program.
His former Vice President Dick Cheney says so, but
this government does not torture people. You know, we stick to U.S. law and our international obligations.
Well, the head of the CIA is trying to tell the world that the CIA did everything right just as we speak, as if it wasn't embarrassing enough. What will America tell the world?
When you call for accountability for rights abuses in other countries, how you're going to be able to do that without being essentially laughed out of the room?
Well, I'd certainly point to the Department of Justice. As you noted, they've already spoken to this.
Correct.
I would say, one, we would put our record against any record around the world, and we think it's very rare and unique for a country to decide to put out a report such as this, a release of a report that we supported. It points to the fact that we believe these techniques were contrary to our values as a nation, were overall detrimental. We believe that. The president has said that.
You seem to be saying that, well, we can just air our dirty laundry, or however you want to describe it, and that's it. That's done with it. Well, when other countries do that, and only that, you say that's not acceptable.
Well, no one is laughing yet. Reaction around the world has been split. There's those who stay quiet and those countries who speak out, like Afghanistan. Aside from harshly criticizing the torture revelations, the Afghan president said there can be no justification for inhumane torture in today's world. But 54 governments were allegedly involved in America's post-9/11 rendition programs. These countries either housed CIA black sites or aided in arresting and transporting terror suspects. Lithuania is asking Washington whether it tortured prisoners on its soil. After years of denial, Poland finally admitted it did allow a CIA prison on its territory, but most European partners seem reluctant to call out their beloved #1 ally. So we wrote to over 20 of them. Less than half answered. Lithuania replied with a condemnation of the human rights violations and added the country has launched a probe into allegations of transporting CIA detainees on its soil. The Czech Republic, they told us they have no official statement on the torture report. That simple. And the UK basically told RT to refer to the Prime Minister's initial statement that torture is always wrong. Well, UK Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg agrees with that, but also says once current investigations wrap up, he's open to a British version of the torture report.
I think once the police investigations are done, once this report from the Intelligence and Security Committee are done, we should keep an open mind, if we need to, about moving to a full judicial inquiry if there are any outstanding questions, because I'm like everybody else. I want the truth out there.
Truth could mean delving into a British role in torture. The UK has already been accused of a cover-up concerning allegations of aiding CIA rendition on their island territory. Diego Garcia. Joining us in the Now is British investigative journalist Tony Gosling. We're also asking our audience on Twitter and Facebook whether they believe a UK torture report should be launched, and their comments will appear on the bottom of the screen. Tony, Nick Clegg has suggested a case might be made for a full legal inquiry into British complicity in torture. How much of a case could there be considering the UK's alleged involvement in extraordinary rendition after 9/11?
Well, I don't think the involvement is just alleged. We clearly have been involved. There's quite a lot of evidence for that, and also certainly helping in torture. We had the case of Binyamin Mohammed, who had some horrific torture done to him, whilst our secret services, MI5, I think, in that case, were actually present in the room and giving the torturers the so-called information which they were using to try and interrogate this poor chap. Now, look, if I was to kidnap or torture somebody, I'd hope anyway that I would be prosecuted and put in jail for decades. So what we're talking about here is systemic cover-up, state terrorism and war crimes. And I think it's probably fair to say that this is the biggest scandal that's come out of the September the 11th attacks. And I think it should also force us to relook at those attacks and see if we've got the response to them right and even understood what happened that day. But it's quite clear with Rendition specifically that certainly had been going on with British complicity. And I'd also point to the crash of a Gulfstream jet back in September 2007. One of the jets which had been used for this rendition program had been spotted by plane spotters in various countries. This same Gulfstream jet crashed in Mexico, and 4 tons of cocaine were found on that plane. So I think what we're looking at here is basically a criminal elite and the criminal misuse of the secret services. And the reason why the Labour government, sorry, not the Labour government, the Labour opposition here in Britain hasn't had anything to say is because they were involved with their David Miliband, the brother of the leader of the opposition here, being the Foreign Secretary at the time, actually complicit in covering up torture back when Labour were in power.
Nick Clegg said he's confident UK agents are not using torture. Are you?
Not at all, no, because there is no proper oversight of our secret services here in Britain, particularly, I mean, even Sir Francis Richards, the former head of GCHQ, was saying that Sir Malcolm Rifkind, who's chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, shouldn't really be doing that job because he's a senior Conservative, and actually what you need is someone at least who's opposed to the present government, some kind of opposition figure, for example, to oversee our secret services. We've got no proper oversight at all here of secret services, so I'm not at all confident that this isn't still going on. I mean, we've got a runaway criminal elite using our secret services, it seems, for our own purpose, and no proper oversight by our elected officials. And, you know, the elected officials seem to be very far down the food chain when it comes to this kind of, criminal activity. The gains from it, you might wonder what they are. Well, of course, this is big geostrategic important countries that are being taken over as a result of these secret service activities. I mean, for example, massive secret service involvement in the takeover of Libya. And we're talking about oil, and we're talking about enormous grabs of national natural resources.
We know there will be not one official held accountable after the U.S. torture report. How realistic is it to assume that if a UK probe went through, that British officials would pay a price if it was proved that they knew about acts of or aided any kind of torture?
Well, I don't think that I mean, at the track record, I mean, let's look, for example, at the Chilcot inquiry here into the Iraq War. We had an extensive inquiry and lots of witnesses, for example, but still the report was never actually produced because it's too embarrassing. I mean, I go back again to the sort of almost like the lack of the rule of law seems to be even worse here in Britain than in the United States, because we haven't seen, I mean, at least the Senate Intelligence Committee have produced this torture report. We haven't seen anything of the equivalent lines here in Britain. Let's not forget also that during that running of this inquiry and the report in the United States, it was proven that the CIA had actually been spying on the Senate Intelligence Committee. So I've got very real confidence that here in Britain that this will that there will be a proper inquiry into this at all. And I'm very concerned that there are many people involved on the periphery of, or involved, even have been in the past involved in torture, who would like to blow the whistle, and they're really afraid to. They're looking at the case of people like Chelsea Manning and Assange, the publisher, and wondering, well, can we actually blow the whistle? I would suggest they probably need to get in touch with groups like the British military personnel Veterans for Peace, so they can blow the whistle without ending up in the Tower of London, which is, I mean, you know, essentially a kind of feudal system we seem to have here, where many of these elites and the secret services, particularly the rich and powerful, are doing so well out of the post 9/11 wars, are above the law.
British investigative journalist Tony Gosling with us in the Now from Bristol. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Anissa.
Russia's isolated. That's the message Western politicians and media are sending, but I'm not so sure. Today, for instance, it clinched a huge atomic deal with India to build 12 nuclear reactors in 20 years, plus Russia will be shipping oil to India. That's not enough to prove Russia has friends.